Welcome back, everyone. Let's get started with our afternoon agenda items. We'll start with the 2025 implementation plan. We will review and consider approval of the draft 2025 implementation plan. The draft incorporates the recommendations provided by the executive committee at the October meeting. Chris Moore, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know this is a tough time after lunch, but I hope to have 2025 implementation plan. For folks that have been with the council for a while, you know this is the second part of a two-part process. I think, Mary, this is maybe the 10th year that we've done this. As Wes indicated, the executive committee met in October to consider a draft implementation plan. We had a good conversation there, and they provided some comments that we included in the draft. And we will be looking at that draft today and hoping for approval of that document. Before we get to that, we basically will take a quick look at our 2024 activities, talk about those very quickly. Also point out why we have an implementation plan. It's always a good idea to remind folks as to why we do that. And then again, get into the 2025 stuff. So there on that slide is the action for today: review the proposed actions, modify it as needed, and then approve. So very quickly, remember that we now have a 2025 to 2029 strategic plan. That's our third strategic plan that we've had in place. It's directly linked to the implementation plan. So having an implementation plan creates that link between the strategic plan and our annual activities. The implementation plan is basically a tool, a good tool. It allows for planning at the beginning of the year, allows us to track our progress throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, just like we're going to do today, report out as to exactly how we did. So in terms of 2024 end of the year updates, I think everyone would agree that we had a very busy, very efficient, very effective 2024. We're not totally done yet. We still have a little bit left, but we are almost there. These are a list of the council actions that we dealt with in 2024, including something that we took care of in October, the Summer Flannel Commercial Mesh Exemption Framework. We talked about sturgeon. We successfully completed the surf clam and ocean quag species separation requirement amendment by our action today. We continue to work on the recreational measure setting process framework addenda, which is a mouthful. We continue to work on the rec sector separation or rec catch accounting amendment. And now that title has changed to data collection amendment. So it's now the rec sector separation and recreational data collection amendment. So we're continuing to work on that through 24, and then we'll continue to pick that up in 25 as well. And there's ongoing work associated with the FH amendment. In terms of stock assessments, staff were involved in a number of stock assessments, including research track as well as management track assessments. You can see the list of the species there, including research track assessments related to squid, management track assessments related to blue line tilefish and others. We've set new specifications for 2025 and beyond for a number of species. There's a list there. And we reviewed a number of specifications for a number of species in 2024. You can see the list there, including things like summer flounder, bluefish, spunny dogfish. Next. In 24, a lot of other projects and initiatives that took up a lot of our time, including, as I mentioned earlier, the development and approval of the 2025-2029 strategic plan. We completed the 25 to 29 research priorities today. We reappointed advisory panel folks. We underwent that review by Parnan and the contractors that did a program review. And we started to implement, as an aside, we started to implement some of those items that were in that particular report. We've talked about our work associated with the Inflation Reduction Act projects. We had a guidance document that we worked on through the SSC. We talked about the EFM risk assessment document as well. Brandon presented that to us this week. We worked on a national fishing effects database. and went through a recreational tilefish permitting and reporting outreach and program review. Next. Science and research, long list there as well. You can take a look at that. Just pointing out a couple things there that we supported, including squid modeling project, spiny dogfish aging project. We supplemented port biological sampling. So again, a long list there that involved council and staff time and resources. Next. A lot of comment letters as well. I'd say based on my review of what other councils do, we have very focused comment letters and seem to parse them out in terms of basically not sending comment letters unless they're really necessary. So I think it works for us. Here's a list here. You take a look at those. Next. Always win. So we always have Julia working on comment letters. There's a list there. Take a look at those. And that's a very quick overview of 2024. And I did that because we've already been through it with the executive committee, but certainly we'll stop here. I'll look at that list and see if there's any questions or comments on any of the things that you see on there. We'll stop.
Peter Hughes.
Thanks, Chris. 2 slides back, I saw clam genetic testing. Can you just remind me again what we're trying to accomplish with that?
That one, let's see, where is that? Is that on this list?
I think it was 2 slides back. Well,
Supplemental
supplemental surf clam genetic project.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jessica isn't here to give us the fine detail about that, or where's Jose? Jose's not here either. But this is basically the project to, oh, yeah, Brandon can help with that. There's an inshore, offshore question related to species of surf clams, and we're helping with that. Brandon?
Yeah, no, you captured it right, Chris. Peter was looking, this was a contract with Cornell. I think it was with Cornell University to do some of this genetics work with a subspecies of surf clam. So it's like a smaller surf clam that they're starting to find inshore off of, Delmarva, New Jersey and southern New England. So it's comparing the genetics of that subspecies to the surf clam that you all manage and looking at those genetic differences and how the genes sort of are the genetic differences between those species and sort of how the gene flow is operating.
So as a follow-up to that, if it's found to be that smaller clam is found to be a subspecies, there's currently no fishery management plan for that subspecies. So would there then, if there is found to be a genetic difference, then that would come back to the council and we would have to develop either add it to our current fishery management plan, or would we have to develop a new fishery management plan to account for that subspecies?
So I would say exactly. It's exactly what would happen. So we don't know, we don't have the results. I think we have some preliminary results that indicate there is some separation, but on that. But yeah, if we find out in fact that they are totally different and they're not included in our ITQ program, then we're going to have to figure out how we deal with that. That's a good point. Good.
Thank you. Chris, so New York had supplied some of the animals that Matt Hare at Cornell had studied to look at the genetic differences, because in Long Island Sound, we had the Solidissima similis, which is the smaller clam, but it's still the same species as the clams that we have in the ocean. But we didn't treat them differently. In fact, I was told originally that they grew that way because they were in Long Island Sound and not in the ocean, only to find out that they were a different subspecies. So they're smaller, the shells are thinner, they kind of look a little different. So I'm very interested in the outcome of Dr. Hare's work to see maybe we would manage them differently or have a different they would go to different markets because of the size difference and stuff. So I do hope we continue to support his work.
Yeah, again, good point. In fact, Jim Fletcher brought up a point today about southern surf clams, and and I'm not even sure what that species is, and how it relates to the surf clams that are in our management plan. But anyway, a lot of interesting questions still out there related to genetics and surf clams. Other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. So again, very busy 2024, very efficient and very effective. I'd say that if you look at the list of things that we said we were going to do in 2024, we got to almost all of them. So well done. Thanks for all your support. Thanks for all your help. Thanks to staff for all their hard work. And we're expecting good things in 2025 as well, which leads me into the 2025 discussion. So before we get into the draft plan, there's an important caveat that I think everyone around the table and in the audience recognize it, which is this implementation plan really is dependent upon us receiving similar resources in 2025 that we've had in the past. So we're expecting for 2025 that we'll be level funded, and that'll allow us to do everything that we're going to be talking about today. I'm now fully staffed with Hayden, starting last week. So we have the staff resources to do all the things that we have listed here and that we're going to talk about shortly. If there's anything that changes relative to budget or any of that, then we'll have a conversation at the council level to discuss how we handle that. But right now, things we look, based on everything that we can tell at this point, we're going to be level funded in 2025. Next slide, Mary, please. So there is a long list of things in that particular document, and I'll try to go through them relatively quickly. But what I'd like to do is stop periodically after major groupings and see if there's any questions or comments before I move on. Remember also that there's a section in the back of the document listed as possible additions. So if there's something that you're thinking about relative to these particular groupings, species or issues, and you think that those might have more, maybe better placed in possible additions, then remember that we'll get to that at the end. Okay. So here's our list for these, for this suite of species: summer flatter scut black sea bass, develop the 2026 to 2027 specifications. So that's develop, not just review. So develop means more work than just reviewing something that we've already done. So remember that. We'll be doing the same thing for the 26 to 27 recreational management measures. The information that'll help us with that is going to be these management track assessments that are listed in number 3. We'll be supporting those. As we do every year, we'll be facilitating development of advisory panel fishery performance reports. We hope to complete the recreational measures setting process framework. And I think, in fact, we have to, by April, the end of April is our deadline for that. And we will continue development of the sector separation and data collection amendment. So that, remember, that title is going to change. Is that it for some? Oh, that's it for summer flatter. So those are major species that we're involved with. Any comments, questions about that before we move on? Okay, seeing none, let's move to bluefish. Same deal for bluefish. Develop 26-27 specifications. We'll have a management track assessment there as well. Advisory panel fishery performance reports. And note that the items that we referred to in the previous section on summer flatter scut black sea bass 5 and 6 will apply to bluefish recreational management issues as well. Next. Here's a long list. Golden for the tilefish species that we manage, golden and blue line. We have on the list, number 10, develop 26 to 28 specifications for blue line. That is somewhat complicated because of our interaction with the South Atlantic Council and the CDAR process. So we anticipate good things this year, but maybe somewhat complicated. The Tilefish specs are already set for Goldens for 26, but we'll review those. I'll have advisory panel performance reports. Here's the CDAR reference that I mentioned earlier. We will review our annual update on how things are going with the private recreational tilefish permitting and reporting requirements. So that's something that we've been doing for the last 4 years. So it's been in place for 4 years. We will also be involved with the development and implementation of strategies to improve angler compliance with permitting and reporting requirements, and hope to initiate a framework action to modify private recreational tilefish reporting requirements. What I'd like to do here is stop, because both of those are somewhat complicated. We talk about 14, 15, and 16. Remember the report that we got from our contractors on how that program was going. There was a long list of things that suggested there were ways that we could improve outreach, compliance, enforcement, all kinds of stuff, right? So I'm not going to go through that particular report, but I think most folks around the table remember that. We are in a position with this particular program, and I'm calling it a program on recreational tilefish permitting and reporting, where we really have to consider what we plan to do in the future, right? So we've heard many times when that subject has come up from Garfo that their resources are limited, just like our resources are limited. And it may not be the highest priority in terms of, their resources when it comes to actually getting help from Garfo relative to those particular requirements. But it is a regulation. We 3, 4, 5 years ago decided that it was important to get this information from the private recreational tilefish folks. We developed this permitting and reporting plan, submitted it to Garfo, and it was approved. All right. But these annual reports that we've gotten suggest that things aren't going as good as we thought they could. The picture really isn't rosy relative to how many anglers are not being compliant with the regulations and what we plan to do with that, right? So again, we had the report from the contractors that said if we really wanted to put a lot of resources into this particular program, this is the way that we could do it. What we're suggesting here is that we consider a couple things in 2025. One, form a work group that would involve, us and the National Marine Fisheries Service, primarily Garfo, to help us with a couple of very focused items related to outreach and also related to the way that these apps are constructed, right, or used. And specifically in that framework action to modify the reporting requirements so that we actually have more folks responding, because it's going to be easier to report. That makes sense, right? So the idea was basically taking out from the reporting requirements some of the data fields related to effort, and just focus on how many anglers actually fish for tilefish. How many tilefish do they catch? Just basic stuff. And with that, we're hoping that we get more compliance. So that's the idea anyway. So those are our thoughts. I think as we move forward in 2025, we'll see how things go. We don't know where Garfo is going to be in 2025 relative to their resources and how much support we can get from them. But I think based on my review of where we're at, I don't think we're ready to just move away from this program in its entirety. But if someone thinks differently, certainly we can have that conversation. Before I go to Joe, just finish this tilefish stuff up. The other one, 17, is to basically continue our work with the 2025 Golden Tilefish Survey. And then the other one is the other survey that we're involved with relative to blue line tilefish primarily, but also involves Goldens, that deep water long line survey. So with that, I'd like to open it up to comments and questions relative to these two species. Joe?
Thank you, Chris. On the recreational tilefish permitting reporting, last week, and I'll look to Anna and Sunny also on this. Last week, we were at South Atlantic Council on Amendment 46 on snapper grouper, and they're headed down this path of recreational reporting, recreational permitting, as well on the Snapper Grouper complex, which some of this kind of falls, side by side with. If there hasn't been already, it may be good that we talk with the South Atlantic as well as what they're going down the path on, because I could see a situation here where we're on one path, they do something else, and for some of us, it's going to overlap because of their control of the Snapper Grouper complex. And the last thing I think anyone wants is two different systems for the same sector, which will just make it worse, not better. So just, and Anna and Sunny were there for that discussion too. And I know we voiced some concerns to them when we were there about what they were doing, but the overlap could be a problem.
Yeah, agreed. And certainly I would think that would be one of the things that the working group would talk about. But we've been in situations with the South Atlantic before where we try to coordinate, say, like EDTRs. And it didn't work so well. Yeah, we had a disconnect. So we can try and certainly hope that, in fact, what happens is exactly what you're talking about, that we have true coordination and similar reporting requirements. Other questions or comments? Yeah, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks for this, Chris. And I think, just thinking about the report we received at the last meeting and about the discussion we had yesterday on the sector separation and recreational reporting / data amendment, I feel like there's some synergies between, that effort that we discussed yesterday and this. I agree with you. I think we're not ready to throw in the towel on this effort yet. And certainly I think if the South Atlantic is, finally, after many turns of the wheel, considering moving forward with something like this, that there are, a few conversations across, both the councils as well as the regional offices that would probably be helpful and informative to, the success of these efforts. Thanks.
Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and thank you for the discussion. I think having Sunny and Anna at the table are gonna go a long way in helping coordinate and keep things on the right track. We are kind of early in it, and as Michelle alluded to, we kind of get wrapped around the axle with this subject. So I think there's plenty of time to work out the details. It's not going to be a quick process, at least not for us, I don't think. But I do think having Anna and Sunny there are going to go a long way to helping make sure that these two councils kind of stay on the same page. And thank you for that.
Other questions or comments? Joe.
Yeah, thanks. Just wondering if anyone here knows the timeline for CDAR 92.
Anna does. Anna.
Yeah, so we're still working out. There's topical working groups through that CDAR process that are still meeting. There's one right now that's dealing with the life history information that's going to feed into the data limited model. So that's the model that is for our stack north of Cape Hatteras. So the timeline could potentially be impacted because the topical working groups were supposed to end, I believe it was earlier this summer, but that has kind of extended because the conversations have been a bit more complex and eye-opening than we originally had anticipated. At the last meeting last month, it wasn't quite clear how that could impact the timeline. It might be pushed back a month or two, but the stock assessment scientists seemed rather positive that we could still be loosely on the current timeline. So right now, the finalized assessment should be done early spring of next year. So both our SSC and the South Atlantic SSC will review that jointly. And then that'll feed into our specification cycle. But I think we'll get a better idea. The topical working group is meeting again next week. We'll get a better idea of how that timeline could be impacted come next week.
Thank you, Anna. Other comments, questions? Sunny?
Yeah, thank you. Are they using MRIP for CDR 92 in the Mid-Atlantic?
I think they are, right, Anna?
Should probably just stay up here.
Yeah.
Yes, they're going to use MRIP for the private recreational sector. They're going to use, at least for our region, our head boat data, so our VTR data, as well as for the charter catch. And then for the sliver, they're going to use MRIP for the charter and private rec, and then they're going to use their head boat survey information for the head boat landings.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. Oh, we have Jim Fletcher.
Dr. Moore, can you tell me why council not use Bluefin Data's app, all recreational fishing in the EEZ, and this would address the blue line tile fishing in particular? But can you tell me one reason that the council will not purchase the app from Bluefin Data that will cover this? Thank you for your time, sir.
So we've had conversations about Bluefin before. The Bluefin app does exist. There's several apps that anglers can use to report, right? And Bluefin, I think, is one of them where it hasn't been, I'm looking at Hannah, it hasn't been certified or approved yet by NOAA, correct?
Yeah, it's not one of the apps listed for tilefish. So any app that is used for federal reporting has to be approved by the NOAA process. When we went through this process, we started working with Harbor Light. So that's who we contracted with to develop the EFIN app. That was approved by NOAA as one of the okayed reporting apps, as well as several others that have been in place for a number of years for the charter VTR, headboat VTR, and stuff like that.
Thank you. So Jim, one of the things that I would expect the working group will be doing as they move through 2025 is looking at the various apps. And certainly I would suggest they take a look at the Bluefin app and see if it offers anything, better, the same, whether it's appropriate app for tile fish as well as the other things that it's being used for. And once we have that review, certainly we can ask NOAA to put that on the list of approved apps.
Dr. Moore, I hate to be interrupting, but Bluefin Data app is what was forced on the commercial industry. It was forced on the commercial industry after it had been on North Carolina. Now, I do not understand why, if the commercial is using Bluefin Data app, there is any reason for NOAA not to accept Bluefin Data app on the recreation. This is inexcusable. Thank you for your time. James Fletcher, United National Fishermen's Association.
Thanks, Jim. I have nothing else to add. Certainly, again, we'll take a look at it through the working group and see where we need to be with Bluefin. Joe Smino?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I apologize for coming back in too, but I mentioned the technology advancing, and I think I've had reason to work with a couple different companies recently. I think we've all accepted that our phones listen to us. I don't think we're quite comfortable with how much they track us, but there's these organizations and there are apps themselves that say in the back door, we can tell you where these people are going. So we're going to get to a point where these apps are going to say, look, they didn't report this year, but we know that they went to the marina 70 times. And, I mean, that's, I think that's just the reality of that. But I really hope that one of the most low hanging fruits I think a lot of us know is that just, for hire folks post their trips. I mean, I've always been waiting for somebody to say, let's just pay somebody to comb through everybody's pages and, count the number of fish on the dock. Because I think that would far in a way exceed anything we've ever seen reported for blue line tile fish. So hopefully somebody's listening and goes for it.
Thanks, Joe. Other questions or comments? Okay, moving on. So here's another set of species we're involved with: mackerel, squid, butterfish, two squids. Mackerel develop and butterfish. And number 19 is again a development of specifications for ILX 26 to 28. For mackerel 26 to 27. Chub mackerel, don't forget chub mackerel. Julia doesn't forget chub mackerel. We shouldn't. Chub mackerel 26 to 28. I teased Julia that she's the only person on the planet that cares about chub mackerel. That's probably not true. But anyway, Julia is the staffer that's responsible for chub. Review specifications for butterfish and longfin in the 26. Again, advisory panel fishery performance reports. We will, to support the development of those specs, have management track assessments for squid and mackerel that we'll be involved with. We'll also be involved in a longer-term research track assessment working group for squid, longfin squid. Continue to support modeling project for a squid length-based assessment and support biological sampling for longfin squid. So a lot of squid, mackerel, butterfish stuff that'll keep Jason busy and Julia as well in 2025. Next. River herring and shad. Don't forget that we also are involved with these species, developed 2026 to 27 CAP for the Atlantic mackerel fishery. It's an important activity that we're involved in and talk about every year. And review the biennial update for those species. I'll stop there. Any questions about squid, mackerel, butterfish, river herring, or shad? Pretty straightforward. Okay, next. Surf clam and ocean quag. We've talked about surf clam and ocean quag at this meeting today. We will review specifications, 2026 specifications for both those species. We'll have the advisory panel performance report, and we'll also continue to support a surf clam ocean quag electronic monitoring project that's being conducted in NIMS. Next. Spiny dogfish, we have the lead working with the New England Council on that particular species. We heard about spiny dogfish at this meeting. We will develop specifications for spiny dogfish as noted at this meeting for 2026-2027. We'll have the advisory panel fishery performance reports. We will initiate a framework to modify dogfish accountability measures. That's an item that we talked about. Certainly, if you have questions about that, we can talk about that. Jason's here to support that conversation. We'll continue to support spiny dogfish aging project and the bycatch reduction project that we currently have ongoing. There's a note down there that says 33 was listed as a specification review in the previous draft. So when we went to the executive committee, we were talking about something a little different. And due to changes from the original projections, the need to set specifications through 2027, which is the next assessment year. The council will set spiny dogfish specifications for 2026 and 2027. Any questions about spiny dogfish? Okay. We're involved with monkfish, even though the New England Council has lead on that particular species. We will work with them as they develop their 2026 through 2028 specifications for monkfish. We will also work with them as there is a management track assessment to support that specification development. And we'll also have a 2027 monkfish research track assessment that we'll track and potentially be involved with. Next. A lot of stuff here. This is ecosystem and ocean planning habitat. In fact, see if I can go to my screen. And these 41 through 47. And 41, we'll continue the development of that essential fish habitat amendment. We're expecting that we're going to make a lot of progress on that particular amendment in 25, hoping to get it wrapped up in 26. We'll continue to do what we've done for the last several years, which is track offshore wind development activities. We will continue to manage the offshore wind web pages that contain a lot of useful information for us and other folks to go to our website. We will do what we've done in the past, which is provide feedback on the AFM risk assessment report for 25. We'll review and provide feedback on the state of the ecosystem report for 25 as well. One of the things that we have been doing every year for the last several years as well is to review an annual report on commercial, our sort of early warning system to indicate what's going on that we may not be aware of, and whether or not we need to put another species on our list of managed species. So it's an important review. And we will continue to maintain and improve NERA products, Northeast Regional Habitat Assessment products. Any questions or comments about any of that? Okay, straightforward. Science and research. Hannah continues to be involved with the coordination of the NTAP, Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel. A lot of stuff going on there. We will continue to support the development of an industry-based survey pilot project that we've talked about as a result of our engagement with NTAP. One of the things that will be different for us in 25 is that we will have new membership for the SSC. So we will be soliciting new folks for the SSC shortly. Brandon's putting that together now. We do know that we have at least two folks that will be retiring from the SSC. So we will have some open spaces to fill if in fact we decide to approve the other folks that are already on the SSC. So this is a 3-year term, and their terms are up. Next, climate and governance. So there's actually 2 slides here. These are all the projects associated with the IRA money. So this is basically an item that says coordinate, support, track progress on the following Inflation Reduction Act funded projects. So we've talked about these before. I'm not going to go into detail unless you have questions about them. We've already, we have contractors for the first 2 that work's ongoing. There's been, in fact, a recent workshop associated with SCUP TRAs. We'll continue to pursue that. We'll see how that goes. We have a RFP on the street related to essential fish habitat projects. We have funded contracts to support which one? Both the third, let's see, the second to the last one, third to the last projects there. Evaluating the data needs and management strategy support climate ready fisheries management, and the second one on governance issues. The other 3 that we have not developed RFPs yet for those. In terms of where we're at with IRA money. So we got a slug of money to support, well, let me back up. So remember, the council's got a little over $2 million each. That $2 million was basically going to be allocated in 2024. We got a good chunk of the money in 2024, about half of it, but we haven't gotten the other half yet. That half would fund the projects that we basically have already signed contracts on. I'm waiting for a better determination that in fact we're going to get the rest of it. I've gotten an indication that in fact we will, and they're going to try to move that money out by the end of December. If in fact that happens, then we'll have a better understanding of, okay, now that we have the money, we move forward with these RFPs for these other projects and get those underway as well. So we'll see. Any questions about that, Joe?
So Chris, are there any delays that jeopardize contracts you have right now, or?
So we've obligated the money. So the money, basically the way it works is that so we went through this process and we identified all the projects that we thought would be a good idea to fund. They reviewed those. We spent a lot of time talking about them, and they agreed that in fact they would fund them, right? So then we moved down the path of, okay, now that you've agreed to funding, we're going to start moving these RFPs out. So we had an initial chunk that basically funded the smaller projects. Those first 2, those are well underway. So they're happening, right? So we've agreed, we've signed contracts. That money can't be pulled back. The other 3 that we have now, ready, either going or almost ready to go, we have the money for. So it's in our account, right? And it won't be pulled back. I'm hesitant to commit to anything else beyond that, given where we're at in terms of the administrative changes and that kind of thing. Okay. Other questions about any of this? Okay. Next slide is another climate and governance slide, 52 through 55. Coordinate with the New England and South Atlantic councils on the IRA funded projects with cross council implications. So we have some projects that basically both New England and South Atlantic are involved with us on, right? And MAFMC is involved in one of them as well. And there are some projects that the other councils, New England and South Atlantic Council, are going to fund that will involve some of our staff as well. So basically, we look to New England for some staff support, went to the South Atlantic for some staff support. It's likely that they're going to come to us for some staff support, which is fair. And so we just need to make sure that we understand that that's going to involve some staff resources. We continue to participate on the East Coast Climate Coordination Group, E3CG, and the Climate Core team as well. It's primarily Kylie. We will provide support for addressing any action items that come out of that group, as well as their 2025 priorities. And there's also this CEFI initiative, the Climate Ecosystem and Fisheries Initiative that we've talked about before. There's regional decision support teams that might involve our participation as well. And in fact, they already have. Kylie's already involved and has been involved in some of those meetings. Any questions about any of that? Okay. Here's some general stuff. Let's say 56 through 61. We continue to be, we staff continue to be actively involved with any issues related to MSC certification. There's a number of our managed species that are certified, and that's an important, it's important, right, to continue to maintain that that relationship and support that. We're going to track any legislative issues and comment as requested. We have the CCC will continue to be involved with, the NRCC will continue to be involved with, the take reduction teams and any protected resource working groups will continue our involvement with them as well. There's also this Hudson Canyon Sanctuary Advisory Council that I am a non-voting member of that we participate on. So I'm not sure exactly where that is going to go in 2025, but if it involves, there's meetings, then typically that if I'm able to, I attend those meetings. Any questions about that? Any of that? Okay, moving on. So here's another general slide, a little general label, 62 to 65. 62, participate on the Marine and Coastal Area-Based Conservation Federal Advisory Committee. I'm not sure how much work that's going to be. This is something that we are involved with in 2024. I'm not sure where that's going to take us in 2025, but it's on the list. It may involve some minimal staff time. It's something that Jessica has been involved with. The other thing is the highly migratory species actions. Hannah continues to track those for the council, and there may be some things we need to comment on. EFPs, occasionally we need to comment on those. We talked about those. In fact, talked about one of them today. And there's this new group, and you look at number 65. That was in possible additions when we presented it to the executive committee. So there's this on-demand fishing gear conflict working group, and it mostly focuses on-demand fishing gear. The conflict part of it, I'm still not sure about why that's in there. But anyway, we do have two council reps that are involved with that, with the New England Council. But to date, we haven't really had any staff involvement. So we're still uncertain at this point as to what, if any, action we will have to take from a staff perspective or develop from a staff perspective. At our last NRCC meeting, we had a good conversation about this, and Garfo agreed to pick up a major portion of this particular action. So we'll see. But that is something that we may be involved with from a staff perspective. And I think that's it for general. Next. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Sonny.
Just a quick statement. There's
Yeah.
a webinar scheduled January 8th workshop for the on demand.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? We move on to communication. Okay, communication outreach. Number of items here, 66 through 71. The first one is continue to conduct public outreach and develop communication projects as appropriate. We have some old photos on our website that need refreshing. So Mary's going to be working on that. In 25, putting together our photo library so we can have something to go to refresh those photos. For folks that may not be aware of it, there's actually a joint regional council website. So you can go and look at and see what all the councils are doing collectively. Links to the individual council's website as well. Mary is the webmaster for the particular website, right? Does most of the work for that. There's also a council meeting calendar, joint council meeting calendar, which typically keeps us from overlapping council meetings, but not all the time. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. So we have that. We have, for folks that are unaware, we have the 50th anniversary of Magnuson coming up, 2026. So we will be doing, collectively, the councils will be doing things related to that. As I understand that the communications group of the CCC is developing a communication plan, basically detailing what those activities might be. One of the things that they've talked about, and you will see come out shortly, is an RFP to support the development of a series of small videos related to councils, Magnuson, and basically highlighting activities that we think would be very useful for social media and just things that folks could use at various places to increase awareness of the councils, let folks know everything that we do and how important it is. So I look forward to that. MREP, big thing for us. So we continue to support that primarily through Jason. Jason serves on a number of steering committees. I've lost track. I don't know if there's 3 or 4, but there's a number of committees that involve staff time. We also support it through actually having staff present at these meetings or at these workshops, and we'll expect that continues in 2025. We also have a trainer. Jessica does the training for new council members. That's something that's a requirement for all new council members, and that's something that happens every year. Any questions or comments about any of that? Yeah, Jim.
Thanks, Chris. Just on that anniversary, when we were having our training for the 50th anniversary, one of the points that when I mentioned when Sam and Janet were in the room about, well, we're at the 20th anniversary also of the last revision, it doesn't mention things, climate change and so on and so forth. So I think it's probably back to Mike and company. It's like we need a little careful about. Janet's response was that, like it always has been the last few years, that's a major lift for another revision, even though everybody thinks we need it, but that's going to probably get brought up. So just a cautionary note. Thanks.
So probably every year, Mary knows better than most, we have conversations with folks about possible revisions to Magnuson. So there was most recently some proposed legislation that came out of a representative from California. I can't remember his name, but yeah, there you go. And that was something that was kicked around that would basically modify Magnuson. There are folks who weren't happy with that proposal. Some folks that were happy with the proposal, but it didn't go anywhere. So I'm not sure what to expect in 2025, but it's always a possibility that someone will bring something forward and then, we have a change that we have to deal with. Jim.
Yeah, Janet did mention, I guess there was some efforts, and particularly there's some review going on a few of the national standards that I guess they were working on that's coming up, so that and well, depending on what happens after the administration changes, but there was some tweaking that would occur in the near future. Thanks.
Okay, other comments or questions? Okay. Next. Just like every year, there's things that we need to wrap up. So we'll, for example, have to wrap up what we approved today regarding subclimate and ocean quag. We will have to complete packages for NOAA fisheries related to the summer flounder mesh exemption framework. And of course, we will have to do what we need to do relative to 2025 specifications to get those packages into to NIMS as well. Next. So here's the perhaps more interesting section for a number of folks. I know that around the table there have been various ideas that folks have had that relate to potential 2025 activities that would fall into this possible addition category, and certainly we can talk about those. This is what we have to date. So 75 here. 75 is basically something that relates to bluefish. So remember where we're at with bluefish. And if it comes, if in fact, as a result of our 2025 management track assessment, there's an indication that the stock is rebuilt, then we'll be looking at recreational management measures differently for bluefish. So that's going to potentially, it's impossible additions because we don't know. Obviously, the management track assessment hasn't happened yet. But if it goes that way, we're going to have to do that. I mean, it's a requirement. So we will be looking at that. There's in 76 a rewording since our October meeting that makes it a little clearer as to what we're exactly proposing here. And again, this is a possible addition. And again, remember the category possible addition is something that basically indicates if in fact resources become available, if in fact there's things that come off the list of all the things we've talked about prior, if in fact there's more time, people, money available, then potentially these would be added to our workload for 25, right? Which I think everyone understands. So this one on SBRM says develop a white paper on the pros and cons of initiating the amendment to SBRM to reprioritize observers, including evaluation of midwater trawl fishery coverage and information on sturgeon bycatch in federal fisheries. So this is something that has been kicked around for a while. This is something that Jason has been thinking about for a while. Certainly we can talk about it if anyone's interested. 77 is a working group on data reporting improvements. We continue to talk about data. We had a good conversation about the did not fish reports. So there's these other data reporting improvements that might be better served by having a working group actually focus on them and develop something for the council to consider. So that's a possibility. The last one is related to anything that might occur as a result of 304F. It says coordinate with NOAA fisheries and other councils, provide input and recommendations in any reviews conducted pursuant to 304F. And I think that's it for our list of possible additions. And then before we get to comments around the table on that, I just want to point out, next slide, Mary, that we did receive a public comment from Megan on an initiation of a framework for establishing a sector-specific demersal OFL ABC according to the allocation percentages established by the allocation amendment. So this is something that I've talked to Megan about, talked to Greg about, talked to others about, and that's something that I think we need to talk about around the table. This is an idea that basically would do exactly that, is that we'd have a separation of OFLs by sector. It's something that I've heard that, and I haven't talked to him directly, that Paul Rago has talked about with Megan and others as well. So that's something that we should talk about today. So let's do that. Let's talk about possible additions at this point. maybe this is a good place to start this particular topic and see how we want to handle that as it relates to possible additions for 2025. With that, questions, comments, how would you like to proceed? Anyone? Michelle.
I also had a couple of other possible additions items, so maybe you should come to me after we've talked about this one since it's currently on the board.
Okay. So before I go to you, Peter, just to let everyone know that when I had the conversation with Megan, I suggested that if in fact the council decides to move forward with this idea, that a better way to handle it might be through a white paper. You know, instead of stepping right into the framework amendment sort of idea, that we actually get some background by, you know, maybe have a contractor work on it or someone, so that we can have something in front of us to understand exactly how this would work. Because, you know, when you think about separating out OFLs, you still have the constraint of one stock, right? And how does it work? How do you separate out OFLs if you're still fishing on one stock collectively? So anyway, that's something that we could incorporate into possible additions, make a change relative to the specific topic by deleting framework and maybe putting in a white paper. So that's an idea. But again, it's up to you all. Bobby. Or I'm sorry, Peter first and then Bobby.
Thank you. I support Megan's suggestion here, and I fully support your recommended path forward with fleshing out a white paper so that we can so that the council can better understand the issues. So that's all I have to say there. Thanks.
Bobby, and then Anna.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I have a motion prepared to push this forward. If you want to go ahead and pull that up now, or we can wait till later.
You pull it up now. There's a bat. You went past it. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
I might need to, I might need to clarify if this, if you intend for this to be added to possible additions or to the main section of the implementation plan, because as it's written now would be, I think, to the main section, but I can modify it to read, add to the list of possible additions if that's the intent.
No, I think it's fine as is. I mean, I think it merits enough that it should be, if we have the ability, we would put it on the main list instead of the I would prefer to have it on the main list, not the possibilities list.
Okay. So we've gone back and forth over the years, over the decade that we've been doing this. Sometimes we have a motion to add stuff to the implementation plan. Sometimes we don't, but given probably just to keep things straight, let's move forward with the motion and then see where it goes, I think is the best way to deal with it. So if Bobby, if you're making this motion, then we would need a second.
I actually need you to read into the minutes first.
Yeah.
All right, move to add the following to the 2025 implementation plan. Task the SSC with the development of a white paper on the feasibility of developing separate OFLs and ABCs for the commercial and recreational sectors, according to their allocations established by the council's allocation amendment for summer flounder, scallop, sea bass fisheries.
And Dan Farnham, you're going to second?
Yeah, that's right, Mr. Chair. Yep, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So we had Anna, and then I saw some hands on this side. Yes.
Thank you. I'm supportive of this motion. I do recognize that we're managing different sectors using basically, the same tools, and sometimes that doesn't always go well. So I have heard the SSC have this discussion before, and they had noted that we had never really directly asked them to consider this particular path forward in detail. So I would be supportive of the white paper, and just I guess this is only going to be for the summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass. So that would be sort of pairing nicely with the discussion that we're having on sector separation for the charter and recreational. So it seems like we have a lot of potential changes coming down the pike in how we move forward. So look forward to seeing how it all shakes out. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, thank you. I also support adding this to the implementation plan. I guess because I've done a few of these before, kind of following your advice, Chris, is in some cases where we have a pretty full schedule on the implementation plan. If we added this to the summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass section, would we have to take something off the plan in order to put it at that level compared to putting it to the other additions section? Thanks.
So in this particular case, we're tasking the SSC. So this would involve basically, I turn it over to Brandon to basically work with the SSC to get this done. So it would involve some of Brandon's time, but most of the work would be done by SSC members, right? So it would be clear to them and hopefully to you all that we, staff wouldn't be developing the white paper. They would. And we've tasked them with similar things in the past, and it's worked out pretty well. So it's something that, again, given that it's not going to be a major burden on staff, I think we could easily add this to the list of things for summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass without too much concern. I'm still one concern. I'm still wondering how it would work, but that's another topic. Mike Benny?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to abstain on this because I think inherent in this motion seems to be either a misunderstanding or a misreading of the national standards in terms of what is an OFL intended to be and what is an ABC intended to be. And they're both defined in the national standard guidelines as the total amount of fish for a stock. You can't have overfishing on 40% of the stock of the catch, or 50% of the allowable catch. An ABC is supposed to be the total catch, inclusive of everything that's catching that stock. And so I'm just concerned that we're asking the SSC to go down a road that really is inconsistent with the national standard guidelines, and would ultimately put us in a place where we really can't do anything with the information provided by the SSC because it's not workable under the national standards.
Thanks, Mike. Other comments? Question? Joe?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, I kind of agree with Mike, even though I'm very supportive on the rec reform stuff. I know there was a lot of work done to try and parse out sector specific Fs that wasn't ready for prime time. I think that work needs to continue. And I think, I think maybe that word separate is more about getting to that appropriate level of split at again, wherever that can happen within this process. I think we are starting to deal with discards separately. Getting to sector specific Fs gets us to a place where we could do accounting better for each sector separately. But I don't know how you can argue with the regional administrator on this. It seems like the wording here might be a little off.
Jim?
So just, and in like the last 5 minutes, I went from not knowing anything about this, or maybe now it's concerning me even more. Would it make more sense then, as a suggestion, to table this and get some read from council on, is this even implementable under Magnuson? Because they're going to do a lot of work. And at the end of the day, say, oh, we can't do it anyway. So would that maybe be a better approach to it?
It's another idea, certainly. But before we make any decision on this, what I'd like to do is put Paul on the spot and have him comment. Hopefully, Paul, you're online and hopefully you can hear me, but I would like to hear your views on the feasibility of doing this. And then we could talk about that, and we could talk about the Magnuson constraints and figure out how we want to handle this. So Paul,
Okay.
can you hear me? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's obviously it's simple in concept, but complex or complicated in practice. And if the what essentially is being proposed is that the sum of the expected ABCs would, have this some known or expected risk of overfishing. So in terms of the overfishing occurring within a particular sector, I don't think that would necessarily be the determination. I think at the overall one stock, one OFL, one probability of overfishing, that would be retained. What this would do is to potentially, again, assign a different level of risk associated with each sector. And then when you have a composite risk within your risk policy, it would reflect sort of a weighted average of commercial OFLs and ABCs and recreational OFLs and ABCs. All that being said, it's not necessarily straightforward how this would be done. For one, your risk policy is supported or established on the basis of a large number of simulations that looked at varying levels of risk as a function of the ratio of current stock size to the BMSY. So all of those things are associated with particular levels. Now, whether or not this approach, that is disaggregation, could be translated immediately into a comparable estimate of risk and a comparable estimate of sort of consequences is unknown. For example, the risk policy was determined on the basis of desirable attributes of the catch, whether it's lower variability over time, low probability of creating overfishing, low probability of altering allocation patterns among fleets or sectors. I would expect a fair amount of debate within the SSC, and I don't necessarily know whether we would have full agreement on that, but I think it can be done, or at least the examination, the white paper concept could be done, and might be a useful adjunct to your conversations as to whether or not you could do it on policy. And then, of course, everyone knows that the consequences or the downstream effects, the subsequent management actions that would be needed are going to be complex and will need to be thought through. But at least conceptually, I think we can approach it. So I hope I haven't spoken too much on the topic, but happy to contribute as appropriate.
Thank you, Paul. Peter.
Wouldn't it be an OFL and then sub ACLs to hold each sector accountable for their harvest?
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what's contemplated in the national standard guidelines. Is you have a single OFL that is used to determine whether overfishing is occurring in stock. You have a single ABC that's set by your SSC, accounting for risk and the risk of overfishing, and counting for all catch wherever it's occurring, bycatch in other fisheries, directed catch, discards in the subject fishery. And then you have an ACL that is determinative of when accountability measures are triggered, and the National Standard Guidelines clearly contemplate sector-based ACLs, as the council currently has, that are themselves the sum of which cannot exceed the overall ABC. But then those sector-based ACLs can determine if and when accountability measures should be imposed on either the fishery as a whole or an individual sector. And sometimes we have AMs that are triggered for one sector while the other sector remains untouched. And sometimes there's AMs that are triggered for the overall fishery as a whole. And that's clearly contemplated in the National Standard Guidelines. A sub OFL isn't, and a sub ACL or a sub ABC isn't. The other thing, while I have the floor, the other thing that I have is it's a concern with the wording of this motion, is it presupposes the allocation of those OFLs and ABCs to be equal to the allocations already established in the council's actions. And I would think if you're asking the SSC to look at OFLs and ABCs, you wouldn't want to presuppose what the outcome would be.
Other comments, questions? How do we want to handle this? Dan Farnham.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I guess to Mike's comment there, in my mind, it comes down to disparate accountability measures here. And I'm looking back at I'm just looking at scup and black sea bass, and over the last 4 years, there's been a tremendous, the recreational ACL has been exceeded 4 years running, I think, on both stocks. And I know we've made progress with the percent change approach. We've gotten down to a 27% overage in scup and a 20% overage in black sea bass, but to me that's not good enough. I don't know. Maybe what this comes down to is we need a better look at how we're going to manage these. I don't know if managing to an RHT is the way to go, or I just see a lot of frustration on the commercial sector side here, as evidenced by Megan's letter, that this might not be feasible. I don't know, but by the sound of it, it's probably not. But we just want to have a discussion upon it. It's from the commercial side, for the commercial sector to be penalized for constant overages of the recreational ACL and the SSC, considering just the lowering the ABC because of that, then both sectors get a diminished quota to begin with. So I don't know what to do here, but it's just concerning on my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, Bobby?
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Just to kind of add a little bit of rationale to this, one of the things that this is kind of centered on this is, the commercial aspect does have MSC certification for scup. MSC certification only applies really to the commercial side of the industry. It's not of any value to the rec side. And it took considerable amount of time and effort and investment to achieve that. But, we run the risk of, we have continual overages on the recreational side that, it could actually revoke, it could revoke the MSC certification on a fishery that is, from the commercial aspect, is being prosecuted correctly. We're staying in our lane. We're not exceeding. But in my mind, it's a way to kind of give us a little bit of a buffer. So if we have sub ACLs, then you don't fall into, if stack status, screwed that up. If a status of a stock is changed, but it was contributed to by a sole sector, if you have it kind of pre-split to sub ACLs, then overfishing can be occurring in one sector and not another, and it won't jeopardize certain things as MSC certifications. So that's a little bit more into the rationale.
Thank you. Yeah, Sonny.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we should, in my opinion, let's vote on this and see how it goes. And if it does pass, let the SSC look at it and let the rock falls where it falls.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I'm going to support this motion. As I read the motion, the thing is you're asking the SSC about the feasibility of this. They can come back to us and say a lot of different things to us, is if we need more time, we need more information, or it's not going to work for this reason. It's asking us for the feasibility of it. Right? You know, so I'm going to support this motion because I think it's the least the discussion needs to be had.
Thank you, Jim. Mike.
Yeah, I mean, only to that point, and is a word of another word of caution, which is we're asking the SSC to develop a white paper on the feasibility. The SSC is not the appropriate body, nor in a position to weigh in on the legal feasibility and the consistency with national standards. The SSC is certainly in a position to talk about the technical, mechanisms of modeling and developing separate, fishing mortality rate approaches, but they're not the appropriate body to discuss the legal and, national standard guideline level feasibility.
Jim, banana.
Yeah, so thanks, Mike. That was much more elegantly than I could have said it. So, and exactly that point, as I said before, we're going to make them do a bunch of work that may not even be implementable. So, postpone this till the February meeting and charge essentially NOAA Fisheries with getting, is this legally implementable under the Magnuson Act? And I think that might be a better way to go to save effort.
Anna.
In terms of a wording change that might satisfy the issue at hand, wouldn't asking the SSC to weigh in on the scientific implications of setting OFLs and ABC by sector, get us out of the feasibility legality of it and keep them sort of in what they're supposed to be, which is the scientific implications.
From my perspective, another good idea. So we got a couple good ideas. Joe.
Well, I mean, clearly, at least some members of the SSC have something in mind. So I would like to see an exploration of these targets move forward. I'm almost worried that we're just fighting over semantics of, is there something to do differently, and does it become a matter of, accountability measures within a sub ACL that changes what we're talking about? Because I'd hate to see this lost on the ideas that are there that, as Paul said, are still staying within the original OFL. So we got the wording wrong in this motion, but there is some idea out there that could be explored as to targets. And I would just like to get there to start that part of it. Now, it might ultimately be an exploration of how do you change accountability, within the framework of Magnuson. But I think that the work that the SSC has to do and, the possible arguments within that, I would like to see that get started.
So the way to proceed might be to substitute this motion with one that focuses more on the technical aspects of this particular issue, right? From my perspective. We have the policy constraints. I think everyone understands those and agrees that there's going to be these policy constraints. But we are faced with an issue that we continue to hear about every year, that the commercial fishery is being unfairly punished by recreational overages because there's one stock, and that stock's being affected by those overages. As a result, quotas are being reduced. That's unfair to them. So I think we understand the idea, or the issue, the problem. Maybe changing this to focus more on the technical aspect of what we're trying to get at might be the appropriate way to deal with it. And as you said, Joe, that SSC seems willing to tackle the technical aspects of this particular issue. So again, my suggestion would be that we substitute this motion for something else, with something else.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would move that we amend this motion to read, strike out the feasibility of developing and just put in white paper on the scientific implications of developing separate OFLs and ABCs. So it's just a quick word change. So you would strike out the feasibility of and add in the scientific implications of setting, of development.
Another idea, given Mike's earlier comments, might be to also to strike the part that relates to according to their allocations established by the council's allocation amendment, and just reference the species that you're interested in.
Okay, yes. Her catch up.
Yeah, you have to put it back up, the prior motion. See the part that says, according to their allocation established by the council's allocation amendment. Delete that.
Does this make sense in its current form?
So can you, would it be difficult to type in the new motion in its entirety so we can just take a look at it? Keep the summer planner scup black sea bass reference, Mary.
Anna, how does that?
That looks fine to me. I think we need a second.
We do, but you want to go ahead and read it into the
Sure.
minutes?
I move to amend to strike on the feasibility of and replace with on the scientific implication of, and strike according to their allocation established by the council's allocation amendment.
All right, do we have a second? Sunny Wynn? Discussion on the motion. Brandon, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I don't want to step maybe off my role here, but I don't want to maybe wordsmith, but I think I would suggest maybe considering replacing implications with considerations. And maybe that seems small, but I think the implications are, if you go over the OFL, you know, there's the, you know, we know what those implications are of doing something. Like, I would suggest, like, what are the scientific considerations? What would you do from a stock assessment perspective? What would you need to be doing from an OFLZV perspective? Like, what science considerations would you need to, that the SSC could provide input on, that would give you some information about how you might go about separating it versus what the implications are. The implications are there's the potential to exceed the OFL, and we know what those implications are. So that's just my sense of what you're trying to do here.
I would be perfectly open to that wordsmithing.
Good. Sunny, you're fine? Okay. Jim?
I can support this. Just curious, would the service still pursue, I mean, look into it. I don't think it'd be in the motion, but the legality, if we do come out with the SSC comes back and said, yeah, we can do this. Well, it might be good to have that. Or do you want to wait until they're done?
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it's until we kind of know what the council actually intends to do, it's hard to say what's legal and what's not, right? I mean, we can certainly summarize for you what the National Standard Guidelines currently say and what our interpretation of that is. But that would not necessarily preclude the council from taking the results of this effort and figuring out a way to sort of massage the sector ACL, ACT process, the accountability measure process. I think there's opportunities there within the guidelines that already exist that the council could avail themselves of.
Any further discussion? See if we can do this the easy way. All right, that's good. Paul Rago.
Just a quick question. Do you have a preferred timeline for preparation of this report?
January 3rd.
Consider it done.
Okay. 2025. So somewhere in there.
Oh, thank you.
Alrighty. I'm going to call the question now. Is there any objection to the motion? Are there any abstentions to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes by unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have this one addition. So I know. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're moving too quickly. Right. Yeah.
Right. All right, let me go ahead and read this into the minutes. Move to add the following to the 2025 implementation plan. Task the SSC with development of a white paper on the scientific considerations of developing separate OFLs and ABCs for the commercial and recreational sectors for the summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass fisheries. Are there any objections to the motion? Any abstentions to the motion? One abstention. Motion passes with one abstention. Thank you, Mike. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now back to the task at hand, which is considering some other possible additions. Michelle.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. So I have two items for consideration, discussion. Hopefully it'll be a little bit easier than what we just went through. But the first pertains to the discussion we had yesterday over dogfish. I was a little uncomfortable with that vote, primarily because of a concern that the SSC raised, that Chris Batsevich raised, that, we don't necessarily have any guidance for when the council might want to consider suspending its risk policy. It is the council's risk policy, so I think we are entirely within our purview to suspend that. But I do think that, in the future, it would be helpful if we were able to develop some guidance around, what are the things that we would consider, for example, stock status, like would we consider, suspending the risk criteria for a stock that is not overfished, overfishing isn't occurring, to consider national standard 8 issues, et cetera. So things like that. So I emailed Mary, we can do this as a motion or we can just do this as for discussion, but because it was possible additions and not sort of within the main body of the document, I didn't know, Chris, how you might want to proceed with that if you prefer a motion.
So I think a motion is fine. At this point, we have the other motion. So yeah, this will work as a motion.
Thank you. So I guess I would move to add to the following list of possible additions in the 2025 implementation plan, develop guidance to address circumstances under which the council could consider suspension of its risk policy. And I think I just provided, some rationale for that. So hopefully this is easy.
We have a motion by Michelle Duval, seconded by Chris Backsavage. Any discussion on the motion? Michelle, I think you gave a little bit of rationale already. So, is there any objection to the motion? Any abstention to the motion? Seeing none, it passes by unanimous consent.
Thank you. So that's one additional possible addition. So Michelle.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. So the second one has to do with surf clam and ocean quahog. So, myself and Joe Cimino were both at a surf clam enhancement mitigation workshop, as was Julia Beatty on staff in November, looking at stock enhancement as potential mitigation for the overlap of offshore wind lease areas with the surf clam fishing grounds. And so, over the past several years, I think there was previously a possible addition with respect to development of spatial management options for surf clam, open ocean, open water aquaculture, or something along those lines. And it sort of came off the list. But, I think the other thing that I hope to get some discussion on was, development of a potential white paper to explore, potential council and no fisheries involvement in surf clam stock enhancement efforts in the New York Bight and Central Atlantic. I think more to, ensure that the council maintains awareness of these conversations, as they're going on. There may or may not be a need for the council to, get involved, just depending on the pace of those conversations. But, I do think it would be good for the council to have awareness of that. So, this is another, I'll just make this as a motion. We'll see where it goes. So move to add the following to the list of possible additions in the 2025 implementation plan, develop a white paper to explore potential council and NOAA fisheries involvement and surf clam stock enhancement efforts in the New York Bight and Central Atlantic. And I think I sort of already gave my rationale for this. So hopefully I can get a second and we can move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We have a motion by Michelle Duval, seconded by Joe Cimino. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, is there any? Oops, I'm sorry, Joe.
Yeah, I will say that, I think NOAA staff are well aware of the discussions. And I think part of this is really just as for the council's involvement, I think just deconflicting areas where these projects, may end up. So I don't think it's necessarily a heavy lift. I think I really appreciate all the NOAA effort to date to support these discussions already.
Any further discussion? Are there any objections to the motion? No. Oh, well, I'm sorry, Maureen. I never saw you. You hide in the corner there. I don't see you over there.
So my questions are for Michelle. I sort of wanted to ask, well, we also have someone on staff in New York who's on the same work group. And we've been having discussions in the office, and I sort of wanted to ask, what is the desired result of starting to do surf clam stock assessment in New York Bight? Is it to increase the population, ensure continued harvest at a time when the stock is not overfished? Is it to put surf clams in areas where they're not found naturally? These are sort of the result of discussions that we've had in the office. Can you just kind of help me here? Thanks.
Yeah, so I'll also look to Joe and others who have been part of, this conversation, and I think Julia's online as well. But this workshop was developed by the surf clam industry. Tom Dameron was very involved in it, and I think, what they are looking for is, instead of potential participation in the coastwide regional fund administrator that would provide, compensatory monetary mitigation as a result of the development of offshore wind, and potential impacts from that, that the industry is saying, they want to keep fishing. And so they don't want compensation. They would prefer mitigation. And so that's what this was focused on, is looking at, is there a framework? Can we develop a framework within which, developers could contribute to the enhancement of surf clams in appropriately sited areas that would allow the industry to continue to operate should they not be able to operate in the manner in which they currently do in areas where offshore wind leases are being developed. Joe, others?
Yeah. I think, all the early discussions revolved around mitigation for loss of habitat to offshore wind, and where that goes from there, we can't say, but that's.
All right, with that, I'll call the question. Are there any objections to the motion? Any abstentions to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes by unanimous consent. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think that has exhausted the list of possible additions to possible additions, at least the ones I know about. And certainly we can at this point think about others. If someone has another idea or wants to bring something to the table, now's the time. I'll leave it at that. So is there any additional possible additions or anything else relates to the 2025 implementation plan?
Our discussion last night about bringing up the updating of the charter for hire does not need to be put in the plan, correct? Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we have one final motion that someone needs to make. Mary, if you can bring it up.
Sonny?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make the motion. Move to approve the 2025 implementation plan as modified today.
Seconded by Bobby Roll. I doubt we need discussion on the motion. Are there any objections to the motion? Any abstentions to the motion? One abstention. The motion passes by unanimous consent with one abstention. Chris, you know what your game plan is for 2025 now?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks everyone for the conversation, the discussion today. I think it was good. We added some things to the implementation plan. We will have a new draft available and online shortly, so we can see what we agreed to. And I look forward to working with you all. Again, another busy year, busy, efficient, and effective 2025. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chris. With that, let's take a break till 3 o'clock and we'll come back and talk about butterfish. Welcome back, everyone. Let's get started with the rest of the afternoon's agenda items. We're going to start off with butterfish mesh requirements. Council will consider a minor butterfish mesh modification that was requested by industry to better avoid retaining small butterfish during directed butterfish fishing. Jason, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Okay, first slide here just has the current butterfish mesh requirements for vessels, and this would only be moratorium permits. You'd have to have a moratorium permit to have this much butterfish to begin with, but they're having greater than 5,000 pounds, which is directed fishing. They have to have a minimum cut-in mesh size of 3 inches, diamond or square mesh. So just a quick slide on what those meshes are. And there's a variation of the diamond. So on the left there is just standard diamond. Imagine the vessel is kind of proceeding kind of up the screen here. And then T90 in the middle is also diamond mesh, but it's just been hung sideways 90 degrees. And then square mesh can be constructed from diamond mesh, but is hung in a way that actually makes it really look square. And they all have some different kind of characteristics in the water under load. It's been kind of the T90 and square mesh performance has been looked at in a couple of studies in recent years. This is just one, I thought, a useful picture from one of them that showed how on the diamond mesh on the left under load, that gap is getting really narrowed versus diamond mesh hung sideways, or T90 on the right under load holds kind of that oval a little bit more. So just a few definitions. There's that I ran into a little confusion as we proceeded with this, but so just a kind of our common definition for talking about those meshes. So kind of where did that 3-inch mesh come? Well, back during butterfish rebuilding, I put rebuilding in quotes because we had a rebuilding amendment, but then subsequent assessments it was never overfished. But we're digging in ways to avoid butterfish, and we didn't have much. There was this pound net study from the 70s that showed 2 5/8 inch diamond mesh would release small butterfish in a pound net. So that kind of got transformed into 3-inch diamond mesh to account for the mesh distortion or restriction that you might get under load while trawling. So then when we had a new assessment that led an expansion or a resumption of directed butterfish fishing, there's still a desire to avoid small butterfish that wouldn't be marketable to the extent practicable. So we just had some conversations at the time with industry, and they indicated they could work at the 3-inch mesh. So we kind of retained that and carried that forward for directed butterfish fishing when that fishery resumed, again, trying to avoid having to discard a lot of small butterfish. And this is just butterfish landings and discards. Landings here are red on the bottom of these stacked bar charts. And so the fishery kind of like disappeared on its own accord, kind of in the late 90s and the early 2000s there. Then it was declared overfished and kind of locked down. And then again, you can see in the 2010s, it started back up again. And that's when this 3-inch for greater than 5,000 pounds came in, as we're trying to figure out kind of how to kind of shepherd that resumption of directed fishing. I can't put up like on the fly current, like some of our fisheries, they have the quotas week to week on the website. But because of how the fishery operates and exporting, it was determined a few years ago that that was giving some potential export clients too much information, that that some of the dealers may have a lot of butterfish in stock at the moment. So we'll publish like the landing things at the end of the year, but NIMS doesn't do the week-to-week quota monitoring because some of the dealers were getting like leveraged by export interests, like, oh, you've got a ton of butterfish, so we're not gonna pay much for them. So just kind of some background of kind of how things got set up and where we're coming from here. So we got the council earlier this year got a letter from Glenn Goodwin, who's fished butterfish for a long time, and requested that 8 centimeter square mesh be allowed in the directed fishery for that greater than 5,000 pounds. But if you do like a quick Google conversion, 8 centimeters is more than 3 inches, but that's like a knot to knot commercial measurement, and it comes in a little bit below 3 inches on like a wedge that enforcement would be using. So that's why he was requesting this change. And based on his experience, he thought that that it would release small butterfish better, and either the square or the T90. And you know, we have that indirect pound met study. We really don't have great information on does that 3-inch diamond effectively release butterfish in a trawl under load. And he thought this would, and we can make that change via specs. It's come up over the years. He's asked me about it over the years, and also at this point had a Cornell study that was kind of aligned to this issue. So, you know, probably back, you know, maybe a year ago, I said, talk to the Cornell folks, and, you know, maybe this can be handled in specifications. So the Cornell study looked at the 8 centimeter square mesh liner and the T90, and it says slightly smaller. They're both slightly smaller compared to the 3-inch. And they found that they release small butterfish at about the same rate as we think the 3-inch diamond mesh does. Again, we don't have direct studies on that 3-inch diamond mesh, but it looked like they had good results, that the 8 centimeter square or T90 was releasing small butterfish, not retaining small butterfish. It was a pilot study, you know, potentially setting up a larger thing, but considering the basis of the current requirements, staff seemed like a pretty sufficient justification for this little addition. However, kind of when we started getting into it, enforcement raised an issue that they're okay with the diamond versus square. In the regs, you do currently see some different mesh requirements for diamond versus square. But the diamond standard hung versus sideways hung, the T90, is problematic. The orientation might not be obvious, complicates enforcement. You know, if they're taking pictures, try to document, it may not be sufficient. They may actually seize mesh in order to really know what they're talking, you know, making a case that's going to further disrupt the fishermen. So they said, you know, we're okay with diamond versus square, but this, you know, having a different size mesh for diamond hung standard versus T90 diamond hung sideways was problematic. So the council kicked this to the enforcement committee, and we're kind of like, staff was kind of making an evaluation of like, go down the rabbit hole on this T90 square mesh orientation as an enforcement issue. When we talked to industry, and they said, we can live with the square mesh. So don't worry about the T90 so much. The square mesh would let us experiment as they want to and use that. So the committee motion kind of reflects balancing the enforcement concerns and attempting, again, increase flexibility per that Goodwin request. So there's no extra provisions for T90. It's just related to square mesh at this point. See that committee motion, there's a slight question about the mesh measurement for just square versus T90. I confirmed with Cornell and John Knight of Superior Trawl that it was the same mesh was used to construct the T90 and the square mesh in that Cornell pilot. And it measures like 2 3/4 inches, but to kind of give a little leeway there with mesh changing size a little bit over time as it's used, that's where the 2 5/8, greater than 2 5/8 came from. So the enforcement committee's motion was recommending that be allowed, that you could use, that directed trips would be required to use diamond mesh 3 inches or greater, or square mesh larger than 2 5/8 inch. And again, there was a little bit of question at the committee about the square mesh measurement. Went back to Cornell and John Knight, and he said it was the same webbing used to construct those. So the 2 3/4 measurement applied to both. And so 2 5/8 should work. So that was the enforcement committee motion. And then this is just that motion with that kind of confirmation part trimmed out as just kind of described in the staff memo and just now. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Any discussion? Any questions for Jason? Mike Penny?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate the work that the enforcement committee did to look into this, and it seems like we have a pretty good compromise here. What I'm just challenged by slightly is typically when we're setting these, we are setting the minimum acceptable size for the mesh, which in the first part we see that 3 inches minimum or greater. But then the second part says the mesh needs to be larger than 2 5/8. So then 2 5/8 mesh would be illegal. And that, I wonder if that's an important factor, or if what we're really trying to say is that the mesh can be 2 5/8 or greater. So I'm just trying to make it be clear whether someone gets on a boat, they've got 2 5/8 inch mesh, is that legal or illegal?
As here, if it was measuring exactly 2 5/8 inch, it would not meet the requirement. And the idea was to allow the the 8 centimeter commercially available mesh, which is measuring 2 3/4. I think if it was simple, I don't think it would. If it adds simplicity, and the enforcement folks are used to that 3 inch or greater. I mean, again, whether you're talking about the original requirement, the 3 inch, or this, I don't think it's going to matter. If it would just kind of add simplicity to have both of them be 3 inches or greater, or 2 5/8 inches or greater, I don't think that matters. And I can see where that could, if they're both the same way, it would reduce confusion.
Mike?
Yeah, I don't like to put people on the spot, but I'm wondering if Coast Guard could weigh in on how this might be applied or interpreted at sea on a boarding.
Yeah, thank you. So generally we just throw the wedge inside the mesh and make sure that it reaches that 2 5/8. So I think if it was specified and clear that it was 2 5/8 or greater, then that's what the Coast Guard would train our law enforcement boarding folks to enforce.
Sorry, just as a follow-up, if however it was worded as appears on the board where it had to be greater than 2 5/8, would that be something that you could work with, or would you want to see the actual minimum allowable size specified?
I think if it was greater than 2 5/8, we could work with that.
And I stand down.
Joe, would you like to read the motion for the committee into the minutes?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. We don't get this committee together often. It's like gathering the Avengers, but we actually, I want to thank Jason and Jose, and we really depended obviously on law enforcement's expertise and comfort level. So thanks to Joshua and Kevin. So on behalf of the committee, I move that the committee recommend that to retain more than 5,000 pounds butterfish, diamond mesh would need to be 3 inches or greater, and square mesh would need to be larger than 2 5/8 inches.
Any further discussion on the motion? Are there any objections to the motion? Any abstentions to the motion? The motion passes by unanimous consent. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
No, I just want to clarify that the motion says we move that the committee recommend, but I think what we're really trying to do is say that we're at the council now.
Yeah. Does that look good now, Mike?
Yeah, one last point, just looking for Jason to confirm. This measure will now get added into the annual specifications package for butterfish. Is that correct?
That's the plan. And my understanding is that since it's still basically achieving the same thing, we should be able to use an abbreviated NEPA process to streamline implementation.
Okay, we're good.
All right, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was following along with the question Mike asked. Is 2 5/8 inch square mesh illegal to use? It is. Okay. That's it.
Jason?
And again, the reason it was set up that way is because the 8 centimeter mesh that folks buy should be measuring 2 3/4 inches. So this should kind of allow that.
Richard?
Can I ask Joe or Jason to just elaborate on what it means by we think the 2 5/8 inches will operate the same way as a 3-inch diamond from the Cornell study?
When so when they looked at the selectivity that that 70 study showed for in the pound net reduction of small butterfish, I forget if it was 10 centimeters or 12 centimeters, but they both, when they in that 70s pound net study, it shifted the selectivity to larger fish. And we saw that same shift with the 8 centimeter square or T90 here. So that's why it's, but we originally made a leap that 3-inch diamond actually is going to be performing like the 2 5/8 pound net study. I mean, so that was an initial leap, and that's why, I kind of purposely use that soft language there. That, I mean, we don't have tests on the 3-inch diamond under load for butterfish. It's quite possible that this would have better improved selectivity towards bigger butterfish than the 3-inch, based on it's actually meeting very similar as the 2 5/8 pound diamond in the pound net. So I think that's why it's worded that way, because originally went from that pound net to diamond trawl. This performance matched the pound net, and we think that pound net 2 5/8 is like our 3-inch current trawl, but that hasn't been specifically directly studied.
Bobby? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this kind of highlights, some of the deficiencies we have in some of the standards we use for applying to gear technologies and regulations. A pound net and a trawl net are not really interchangeable. They're not the same animal, and relying on a study that was done. I know it's gonna be hard for y'all to believe, but a year before I was born. By that same metric, 8-tracks were, all the rage. They were going to rule the world. So I think over time we need to kind of look at these building blocks that we use for regulations and see if they need to be refreshed. I mean, it's kind of hard to swallow the best available science on mesh size selectivity for butterfish being that old when there was really wasn't even a fishery for it, and it was by happenstance because it came from a study that had nothing to do with this fishery. Gear has been modified just like everything else. Technology is advancing, gear technology advancing. We can't weigh it against something that is literally that old. I mean, it's almost 50 years old. So I think I know that we've got a lot on our plate for the next couple of years, but it's something that the council may want to consider, that there is quite a few dinosaurs left in here that we're still building off of. We may want to go back and kind of reevaluate and rebolster.
Emerson Hasbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound fine.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So, and I want to thank the council for supporting this mesh size change. So I'm with the Emerson Hasbrook. I'm with the Cornell Marine Program. I conducted the pilot study that Jason referred to. So butterfish are sexually mature at 12 centimeters, and the 8 centimeter, both T90 and 8 centimeter square, reduce the catch of 12 centimeter and smaller butterfish by 67% in our pilot study. So just to reinforce that it's really effective at releasing those butterfish. Again, a 67% reduction in 12 centimeter and smaller. Thank you.
Jason.
And Emerson, what were you comparing that to as your baseline?
That we were using a small mesh liner as a control. A squid liner as a control in the control cut end.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that's not from the 3-inch mesh to these. It's from the squid, maybe 2 1/8 inch, but the selectivity pattern kind of matched that old study. So we still think it's going to be relatively protective of those smaller butterfish. Just wanted to clarify that those percents, right?
Yeah, and I think this is actually a greater reduction in the 12 centimeter and smaller butterfish. That 67%. I don't recall what the reduction was in the pound net study, but I think it was less than 67%.
Any further comments? Anything else, Jason? All right, with that, thank you very much. Let's get a couple agenda items done off tomorrow's list. I can see those that have a long drive are quite anxious. Let's start with liaison reports. New England Council report. Peter Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my liaison report from last week's New England Fisheries Management Council meeting that was held in Newport, Rhode Island. It's kind of a short report. There weren't a lot.
Peter, move the mic in just a little bit.
Oh, sorry. It's kind of a short report. There weren't a lot of actions taken. The Dogfish Committee report, we've already discussed and voted on it all yesterday, so there's no report there. The Groundfish Committee report is pretty complicated. There's a live link in my document for those that would like to examine it a little more in depth. But the New England Fishery Management Council took final action on Frame Adjustment 69 with catch limits for 4 new Atlantic cod stock units. The council developed commercial groundfish sub-ACLs in the new cod stock units in the Eastern Gulf of Maine, the Western Gulf of Maine, Georges Bank, and Southern New England, while also developing sub-ACLs for other fisheries in those regions. There were a lot of moving parts and motions made in regards to the cod stock units and other associated fisheries. So for additional information, please click the live link and enjoy some light reading. All jokes, sorry. We had a Trans-Boundary Management Committee report. Not sure that the Mid-Atlantic Council is too familiar with that, but we share some stocks with our Canadian partners and work to negotiate with them on an annual basis to set some tax for Canada and for the U.S. So the council approved the Trans-Boundary Management Committee guidance recommendations for the United States and Canada. Their total allowable catches for 2025 are Eastern Georges Bank haddock TAC of 7,410 metric tons, and they set the Georges Bank yellowtail flounder TAC at 200 metric tons. That Georges Bank yellowtail flounder TAC is very important to us because we prosecute a very profitable scallop fishery in the Georges Bank area. So it's not a lot of yellowtail, and we occasionally encounter some problems with exceeding the ACL. But we've worked to remedy that in years, and hopefully we can do that again this year. The Scallop Committee report, the council signed off on Framework 39 with measures for the fishing year 2025 and took action to address the Northern Gulf of Maine possession restrictions and to delay the opening of the access areas 1 and 2 until May 15th. The actions that were taken, the full-time limited access fleet will receive 2 access area trips in the amount of 12,000 pounds each, equating to a total of 24,000 pounds, as well as 24 days at sea to be utilized in the open areas. Part-time vessels would receive 9,600 pound allocation that can be fished in either closed area 1 or closed area 2, and would receive 9.6 days at sea to be utilized in open access areas. For additional information, there's a live link there also. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report. There were not a lot of fishery actions taken that really have a lot of interest for this council. Really, there were no other fishery actions taken. There were a lot of reports that we'd heard. So I'm happy to take any question, but the live links are in there and you can read to your heart's.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Anna?
I'm just curious, where is that report? Because when I click on the live link, it's just the agenda.
So I just sent it out to Chris and Mary, so you'll have it soon. Or update your browser in your.
Any more questions for Peter? Let's move on to. Oh, he just got back in the room. Hey, Rick, do you have anything else to add to the New England Council report?
I'm assuming that Peter gave a tremendous report as usual, but you guys worked through dogfish. One thing I did want to mention earlier under your work plan was we did have that on-demand working group as a priority to work on the gear conflict stuff, and Garbo is taking the lead on that. So I just wanted to recognize it. That also passed our priority list as well.
Thank you. Let's go on to the South Atlantic Council liaison report. Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank you all for your hospitality and allowing me to sit in on your meeting this week. It's always very informative and helpful to our efforts in the South Atlantic. And of course, to follow Peter's lead, I'll be brief and just touch on a few items that we're working on. Firstly, our favorite subject, our favorite species, red snapper. We received an update from the regional administrator regarding the pending secretarial amendment to address overfishing. This amendment will be based on the results of an updated CDR 73 stock assessment that will now include data through 2023, allowing for a reevaluation of the stock status since the previous terminal year of 2019. The secretarial amendment will consider reevaluating the criteria for determining overfishing, given above average recruitment in most recent years. It will also consider looking at a variety of temporal and spatial depth-based discard reduction areas and time periods, as well as changes to the fishing year, changes to the start of both recreational and commercial fishing seasons, including how the recreational fishing season is structured. It will also look at establishing an annual experimental studies program that will promote the continuation of the collaborative work that's currently ongoing under an exempted fishing permit down in Florida. The agency is targeting February of 2025 to hold in-person public hearings in anticipation of meeting the June 2025 deadline as mandated by the courts. Moving on to black sea bass, we continued our discussions in Amendment 56 on management options for the black sea bass. Due to very low abundance, we're looking at options to reduce allowable catch levels. However, while we work through some data concerns with the current stock assessment, we are right now just evaluating some options to reduce recreational discards through potential actions such as single hook rigs, closed nearshore areas, changes to the bag and size limits, and possibly a recreational season closure. We're going to hold public scoping via webinar prior to our March council meeting. We also discussed the need to collaborate with the Mid-Atlantic to kind of evaluate the potential shift in this stock in the face of climate change. I think we've got some real issues that we all need to take a hard look at. Moving on to Dolphin Wahoo, we received an updated presentation on our management strategy evaluation that's being completed for the dolphin fishery along the entire Atlantic coast. We are going to convene the Dolphin Wahoo Advisory Panel again this spring to further discuss and offer some advice for us during our June council meeting. One of our other problems right now is our sea fire program. We're continuing to work on the need to try to improve compliance with our for-hire reporting requirements. Been a lot of frustration mounting among the participants in the fishery that are not seeing any results from their reporting efforts. We formed a new for-hire advisory panel, which is going to include one member from the Mid-Atlantic, one member from the New England, and one member that's duly permitted between the South Atlantic and the Greater Atlantic. Thankfully, we've selected Adam Nowalski and Brian Bacon to fill these seats. I think they'll do a great job. And Brian was actually also selected to sit on the Dolphin Wahoo Advisory Panel. So we really look forward to their contributions in those efforts. And that's really it. That's the highlights of our meeting. Again, thanks for all your warm hospitality and safe travels and happy holiday season to everybody. Thank you.
Anna?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Tim for his 9 years of service. This will probably be the last meeting he joins us for here on the Mid-Atlantic. He has done a full 9 years on behalf of North Carolina for the South Atlantic, and I just want to personally thank you for your service.
Thank you, Anna. And this will be my last meeting here, and I certainly will miss this group. It's been a real treat to come up here and learn about your fisheries up here, and they are vastly different than ours. However, with the changes we're seeing in climate right now, they're not so vastly different anymore.
Chris, Bat 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, thank you for the report, Tim. Always informative. You for black sea bass, you mentioned nearshore closed areas to reduce recreational discards, and I've found a news release and looks like it's in federal waters, which makes sense being a federally managed fishery. Was there any discussion at the committee level with working with the states to address discards in state waters, since a lot of undersized black sea bass are caught in state waters, but that's out of the council's jurisdiction, but of course it's still the same stock. I don't know if there was any discussion about that potential issue last week. Thanks.
It did come up in the discussion, and I think it was a very short discussion in that it just was not within our purview to do anything, and pretty much the discussion ended right there. But it is an issue, and when we look at the discards, according to the data we were presented with, 3.5 million individual black sea bass were discarded in the estuary from the South Atlantic. Only 10% of those died, or 15% of those died. Where the rest of them went, nobody seems to know, because they weren't caught anywhere and they can't be found in any survey. So I do think there's a lot of benefit to working with the states. It's just I don't know how that would be accomplished, and it's pretty much out of the purview of our council. Thank you.
Rich.
Thanks, Tim. That was a nice update. I had a quick question about the single hook rig exploration of using single hook rigs for black sea bass. I mean, I'm assuming it's to try to reduce the discard mortality on multiple hooked trip fishing events, hooking events. But has there been any studies on to to show what you expect to get from that?
I don't think so, Rich. And I'm not sure it's really, it was, I don't think the thought was that much to prevent mortality as to slow the rate of catch. You know, instead of catching 2 and 3 at a time, you're catching 1 at a time. You know, there was some discussion among our advisory panel that in these in these areas where the discards are so high that there are some tagging studies that maybe show that the same fish are getting caught over and over again. We really have that data to go too far with that, but I think the premise was that you know, one hook just slows the rate down, not necessarily looking at mortality.
Chris Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tim, thanks for the report. I'm curious about the secretarial amendment. It's an amendment, right? So what is the timing of that again? And how is the council going to be involved in the development of that amendment?
So the timing of it, the courts mandated that it be in the federal registry by June of 2025. So it has to be in the registry, completed and done. Our council will not be involved in in anything other than reviewing. We will have the opportunity to review it, just as everybody in the general public will. But as far as the development of the amendment itself, the council is not involved in the development of it, only in the review. The update we got from the regional administrator was a brief overall update without a whole lot of detail. I think that detail will be laid out here for these February public hearings. So we'll all know a little bit more about the real details that are in the amendment. But as far as the development of it, that's purely the service. Thank you. I hope that answered your question.
Any more questions or comments for Tim? Thank you very much, and we will miss seeing you here.
Thank you.
Let's go to our final agenda item of the day, the Rick C. Savage Award presentation. Dewey Hemmelwright, would you like to meet me up here, or do you want me to meet you in the back? Okay. Nick, we'll go seat right here. While he's making his way up here, once a year we have an opportunity to present the Rick C. Savage Award. This award acknowledges an individual who has added value to the council process or made significant contributions to the management and conservation of fishery resources in the Mid-Atlantic region. This year, I have the honor of presenting the award to Mr. Dewey Hemmelwright. Oh, scared. I'll come back to you. Dewey was appointed to the council in 2012 to fill a midterm vacancy as a obligatory member from the state of North Carolina. He went on to serve 3 additional full terms for a total of 11 years. During this time, he brought important on-the-water perspectives to our discussions and helped us understand how potential management decisions would affect people's lives and livelihoods. He asked great questions and was always willing to share his own knowledge and experience with the council and others. While he often served as a voice for the U.S. fishing industry, he did an outstanding job of balancing the interests of commercial fisheries and the sustainable management of the resources as required under Magnuson. Dewey served as chair of the Highly Migratory Species Committee for 7 years and participated on most of our other committees at different times. He also served as a liaison to the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council and as council representative on the National Marine Fisheries HMS Advisory Panel. Dewey, it is my pleasure and privilege on behalf of the Mid-Atlantic Council to present you with the Rick C. Savage Award, which we present with gratitude and appreciation for your positive influence on and the contribution to the conservation and management of Mid-Atlantic fisheries. Good.
As Wes asked me, did I want to say something? I said, sure, I got something to say. As always, I thank everybody for bestowing this award upon me. 11 years serving on the council is a long time. You get to do a lot of things. It's a long process, sometimes too long for if you're a fisherman and what you're trying to do. But I appreciate it and thank everybody for the award.
Thank you, Dewey. You can sit it right here. We're almost done. That concludes today's agenda items, but we do have one announcement from Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think everyone here recognizes that tonight we're having our holiday hospitality event. So it is, what time is it now? It is 3:45. So hospitality doors will open up at 4:30. Food will be there at about 5:15 or so. So we'll have food around 5:15, 5:30. If you want to come to the holiday hospitality event and you didn't let Shelley know, we still have room. So just show up and give her money and you'll be welcome. So everyone, we'll see you all at 4:30. Thank you. Oh, wait, before we go, room number, same as yesterday, 632. So it's in room 632 in this hotel. Thanks.
All right, that concludes today's meeting. Bright and sharp, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.